Hi everyone, Bex here today to do a book review on A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I was actually assigned this book to read for the BookTube Prize. It was on my radar, but I didn't have specific feelings to pick it up. However, upon finishing the book, I felt like I really had things I wanted to share and say about my reading experience, so here we are. This is volume 1 in a planned 2-volume series of Obama's presidential memoirs. So in my mind, I thought it would be volume 1 would be term 1, volume 2 would follow term 2, but that's actually not the case. This first book actually goes all the way back to Obama's childhood and ends around 2 years into his first presidential term, so you cover a lot of ground. He also says right at the beginning of the book that he wants to give context to everything that happened. Context means lots of details. I was all for that, but it explains why this book is so big. The hardback edition is approximately 768 pages. The audiobook is over 29 hours, so it is definitely a commitment. The first part of this book focuses on his early years, talking about where he grew up, the people that were around him in his childhood, and sort of the decisions that eventually led him to community organizing, law school, the Illinois Senate, the US Senate, and eventually running for president. Since I listened to the audiobook, I can let you know that it is over 8 hours into the audiobook before you actually get to the point where he is elected president. So you have a large chunk of this book that gives you a lot of background information, which I found very helpful and interesting. I have not read any of Obama's other books. If you have read those, this might feel a bit repetitive to you and unnecessary, but I really appreciated all of the extra details and context that it gave about kind of where he was coming from and his mindset. Once he's actually elected president, the rest of the book covers a lot of different things in great detail. He covers the Great Recession, the Affordable Care Act, climate change, Libya and the Arab Spring, just to name the big ones. I really liked getting that deeper look into most of those things. My knowledge is generally very surface level, especially due to the fact that I turned 18 in 2010. So when Obama was first elected, I couldn't even vote at that point. So my knowledge is quite thin around that time. And so to get this extra information, especially because the book goes up to 2011, I really liked that. I enjoyed getting that extra behind the scenes look into things. Interestingly, this book ends with the raid on the compound where Osama bin Laden was living, and I found this really interesting because it is very intense. It reads almost like a thriller, although I knew what was going to happen because I remember when it did happen, it had more of that traditional novel feel. I liked having this be the end. I was very much on the edge of my seat in terms of all the details that he was giving behind the scenes and the process leading up to it, all the decisions that were made, all the people involved. It's arguably one of the most memorable things that happened during his presidency. So to end the book on this, even though it's not necessarily a positive thing, was an interesting choice, but I liked it. Other things that I liked about this book were the writing. I thought that it was very approachable and it flowed really well. Obama has written 2 other books. It's mentioned in this book that he kept journals, so he definitely has a certain skill and ability to sort of break things down and explain things to you and share all the fun little tidbits of things. I also really liked the small anecdotes that he shared about daily life in the White House, the staff that worked there, sort of the humorous moments when he included his wife Michelle and his daughters Malia and Sasha and sort of gave their thoughts on different things, how they reacted to things throughout the time that he at least covered in this book. Another thing that I liked was that he did acknowledge mistakes that he and his team made on the campaign trail, sort of why they made them in that moment, why they made that decision, and actually why it didn't work out, and analyzed it and sort of came out the other side saying, you know, this is what we did at the time, but if I had a chance to do it again, I probably would have done it this way. I think I just appreciated the level of thought that went into something like that, even though it was the campaign trail and he did eventually win the presidency, so it obviously didn't matter as much in the end, but I still appreciated the fact that he reflected on it. My favorite thing throughout the entire book was his descriptions of interactions with other world leaders, descriptions of their personalities. Anytime he was meeting another world leader, he was going to a G20 summit or a conference, anything like that, I got really excited because his descriptions of these other world leaders were hilarious. I particularly loved scenes that involved him, Angela Merkel, and Nicolas Sarkozy. Anytime those three were together, especially because Angela and Nicolas, their personalities are described as being complete opposites, and so him describing their facial expressions and how they're reacting to each other, you know, in a room together was just, those were the moments when I was laughing out loud reading this book. There were times where I was sort of chuckling or found things humorous, but these were the moments that actually made me laugh out loud. Just a personal favorite thing. Of course, with any book of this length, with this level of detail, there's going to be some stuff that you don't like as much, that doesn't keep your interest. For me, it was all the stuff about the Great Recession. It absolutely had to be in here. He couldn't not include it. It was a big part of the campaign trail. It was a huge part of his first 2 years or so of being president. But for me, because I lived through it, there's been movies made on it, it's mentioned all the time, I'm just tired of hearing about it. In this book, he got into the details of how it happened, why it happened, the effects of it, and then eventually once he was elected, the plans that he had to put in place with his team and with Congress to actually try and fix it. And I just didn't care as much about that. I was tired of hearing about it. It didn't keep my interest as much as the other sections. It's very much a personal preference for me, but had to mention it. I also found that the timeline was a little confusing. It could be because I was listening to it on audiobook and I didn't have the physical copy to kind of flip through and center myself on it at a particular year. But I think because the sections were done where he would talk about the Great Recession or the Affordable Care Act and he would follow it through from beginning to end and then jump to something else, when he was jumping to that next thing, I wasn't totally clear on where we were in the timeline, or when he was going through following the Affordable Care Act all the way through, I was like, okay, I want more dates. I want to understand where we are in his term so that I could actually follow the timeline and understand how long it took for things to happen. He did have dates in there, but I think maybe because I was listening to it or it just wasn't in there enough, I kind of lost track of where we were overall. The last thing that I didn't really like as much kind of pairs with a thing that I did like. When I mentioned on the campaign trail, I liked how he got into analyzing their decisions and why some of them weren't the best ones at that time. When he's talking about decisions that he made as president, I almost felt like he was trying a little too hard at times to justify the decisions that he was making. It came off as a little defensive and just a little awkward. I noticed it a few times. I think if it had only happened once, I wouldn't have mentioned it here, but it happened a few times and I was listening to it and just thinking like, oh, that just doesn't come off right. I understand wanting to explain why you made a decision, but it just, the level of defensiveness it was there enough that it felt a bit awkward to me. So I feel like if those parts had been rewritten a bit, they might not have come off the way that I felt they came off. That being said, overall, I did really enjoy my reading experience with this, especially considering the fact that I wasn't actually planning on picking it up anytime soon, if at all, and then it was assigned to me, and I actually was looking forward to reading it once I had started. If you are already interested in reading this book, I say absolutely go for it. It's worth it. Just be ready for the level of detail that's in here. I mean, the book is long. You should expect that anyway, but I know some people have complained that he focused too much on too many things and he should have cut it down. But I mean, other than my personal thing of not really liking the Great Recession part, I totally understand why this book is as long as it is. So just be prepared for lots of details, and if you want to read this book, you should absolutely pick it up. I also want to mention that it will be very helpful if you have an understanding of US politics and the players. My knowledge wasn't as strong from that time period, but I recognize a lot of the names, so it wasn't too difficult for me to kind of keep up with what was going on. It is a presidential memoir, so there is a lot of time spent on working with different people in politics, in Congress. Yes, he does have those bits where he's talking about what daily life is like in the White House. You have the stuff about his childhood and sort of growing up, but this is a presidential memoir, so the bulk of it is going to talk about decisions that he made as president. So if you don't have that US politics knowledge, this is probably going to feel like a lot more of a slog than you want it to. I also highly recommend the audiobook. Obama narrates, and because he wrote the book and he was there for all the things that he's talking about, he always has the right inflection, the right tone. His delivery of certain lines is very humorous, and I feel like I wouldn't have laughed as many times listening to this book if someone else had been reading it. Because I had such a positive experience with this, I will definitely listen to the next volume whenever it is published. I think it'll probably be another chunker because he's still got 6-ish years of his presidency to cover, plus probably some reflections after first leaving the White House. Either way, I will be listening to that audiobook even if it's longer than 29 hours. If you also read A Promised Land, let me know what you thought of it down below. What parts were your favorite? Did you really appreciate all of the details? Was there something you didn't like as much? Let me know. As always, all of our links are in the down bar, so you can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.